Sipahi were two types of Ottoman cavalry corps, including the fief-holding provincial Timali Sipahi, which constituted most of the army, and the regular Kapikulu Sipahi, palace troops. Other types of cavalry which were not regarded Sipahi were the irregular Akinci. The Sipahi formed their own distinctive social classes, and were notably in rivalry with the Janissaries, the elite corps of the Sultan. It was also the title given to several cavalry units serving in the French and Italian colonial armies during the 19th and 20th centuries. Name: the word is derived from Persian Sipahi, meaning Satan or soldier. The term is also transliterated as Sipahi and Sipahi, rendered in other languages as Sipayu, Sipahis, Spaya. Description: the term refers to all freeborn Ottoman Turkish mounted troops other than Akinci and tribal horsemen in the Ottoman army. The word was used almost synonymously with cavalry. The Sipahis formed two distinct types of cavalry: feudal-like, provincial Timali Sipahi, which consisted most of the Ottoman army, and salaried, regular Kapikulu Sipahi, which consisted cavalry part of the Ottoman household troops. According to some historians, the explanation of the Sipahi system, at the height of the Ottoman Empire, Suleiman's reign, the flexibility of the federal dictatorship, where the Sultan was supreme, the prefecture system was genius and merit-based. The provincial governors, or beys, were rotated every few years, preventing land inheritance. The provinces, or sanjaks, were not all equal since Anatolia and the Balkans were mostly ruled by Turks, while other areas of the empire were more flexible, adhering, somewhat, to local traditions. The entwinement of land, military, politics, economics and religion was a way of life. The Timur system, where the Sultan owned all land but individual plots of land, came with residential rights. The Ottoman people had rights to the land, but the Sipahi, a unique kind of military aristocracy and cavalry portion of the military, also lived on the land with the farmers and collected tax revenues, usually in kind, to subsidize the costs of training and equipping the small army dedicated to serving the Sultan. The Sipahi did not inherit anything, preventing power centers from growing and threatening the supreme power structure. The locals on the Timur used the land and all it produced. Timali Sipahis status: the Timali Sipahi, or Timariot, was the holder of a fief of land granted directly by the Ottoman Sultan or with his official permission, by Beylerbeyis. He was entitled to all of the income from that land, in return for military service. The peasants on the land were subsequently attached thereto. Timali Sipahi's status resembled that of the knights of medieval Europe. Like medieval knights, they were not legally owners of their fiefs. The right to govern and collect taxes in a Timur fief was merely given to a Timali Sipahi by the Ottoman state, and in return, Timali Sipahis were responsible for security of the people in their Timur, enlisting and training Sebelu soldiers for the army. A Timur was the smallest unit of land held by a Sipahi, providing a yearly revenue of no more than 20,000 AKCE, which was between 2 and 4 times what a teacher earned. A Ziamit was a larger unit of land, yielding up to 100,000 AKCE, and was owned by Sipahis of officer rank. A Haz was the largest unit of land, giving revenues of more than 100,000 AKCE, and was only held by the highest-ranking members of the military. A Timur Sipahi was obliged to provide the army with up to 5 armed retainers, a Ziamit Sipahi with up to 20, and a Haz Sipahi with far more than 20. The Sebelu were expected to be mounted and fully equipped as the Sipahi themselves. They were usually sons, brothers or nephews, and their position was probably more similar to squires than men-at-arms. The Sipahi were traditionally recruited among Turkic landowners, and thus, the non-Turkic provinces such as Arabia and Maghreb did not have Sipahi. Recruitment of non-Turkic Sipahi was banned with the 1635 Firman. In contrast to the Janissaries, Timali Sipahis from that time onwards were Turks. a rivalry between Janissaries, who controlled the central bureaucracy of the empire and had a lot of political influence, and Sipahis, who controlled the provincial bureaucracy and had the power of the army, prevented them from cooperating against the House of Osman. Military in wartime, Timali Sipahis and their retainers were gathered under their alabays. Alabays were gathered with their troops under Sanjak Beys, and Sanjak Beys gathered under Bailey Beys. If a battle was to be fought in Europe, Rumeli Sipahis took the honorary right flank under the Rumeli Bailey Bey, while the Anatolian Bailey Bey and his Sipahis took the left flank. When a battle was in Asia, positions were switched. This way, the Ottoman classical army's flanks wholly consisted of Timurid cavalry, while the center consisted of Janissary infantry and artillery divisions. The equipment and tactics differed between the Anatolian and Balkan Timali Sipahi. The Anatolian Sipahi were equipped and fought as classic horse archers, shooting while galloping. Yet they weren't nomadic cavalry and their status was similar to medium cavalry class. Balkan Timali Sipahis wore chainmail, rode barded horses and carried lances and javelins, and fought as medium cavalry. Timali Sipahis of the classical Ottoman period usually comprised the bulk of the army and did the majority of the fighting on the battlefield, while infantry troops at the army's center maintained a static battle line. The cavalry flanks constituted its mobile striking arm. During battle, Timali Sipahi tactics were used, opening the conflict with skirmishes and localized skirmishes with enemy cavalry. Regiments of Timali Sipahis made charges against weaker or isolated units and retreated back to the main body of troops whenever confronted with heavy cavalry. During one regiment's retreat, other regiments of Sipahis may have charged the chasing enemy's flanks. Such tactics served to draw enemy cavalry away from infantry support, break their cohesion, and isolate and overwhelm them with numerical superiority. Anatolian Sipahis had the ability to harass and provoke opposing troops with arrow shots. More heavily equipped Balkan Sipahis carried javelins for protection against enemy horsemen during their tactical retreats. All cavalry flanks of the Ottoman army fought a fluid, mounted type of warfare around the center of the army, which served as a stable pivot. The standard equipment of Rumeli Sipahis of the classical Ottoman period consisted of a round shield, lance, sword, javelins and plaited chainmail. Their horses were barded. Standard equipment of Anatolian Sipahis in the same era was a round shield, composite Turkish bow, arrows, kilage and leather or felt armor. Besides these, Sipahis of both provinces were equipped with bows, digan and sespa maces, and idagan, teba and sagar axes. Anatolian Sipahis sometimes also carried lances. Kapikulu Sipahis. Kapikulu Sipahis were household cavalry troops of the Ottoman palace. They were the cavalry equivalent of the Janissary household infantry force. There were 6 divisions of Kapikulu Sipahis. Sipahis, Silatas, right Alifasis, left Alifasis, right Garips and left Garips. All of them were paid quarterly salaries, while the Sipahis and Silatas were elite units. Silatas were chosen from the best warriors in the Ottoman Empire. Any Ottoman soldier who committed a significant deed on the battlefield could be promoted to the Silata division, although normally members of other mounted units, like Timali Sipahis or one of the other less prestigious of the 4 divisions of Kapikulu Sipahis, were promoted this way. Infantry soldiers had to enlist as Serdengakta and survive suicide missions to join Silata division. If a Janissary ever became a Silata, other members of the division with cavalry backgrounds despised him and former comrade Janissaries considered him a traitor. But because the position and wealth of a Silata was so attractive, Janissaries and other soldiers still enlisted for suicide missions. The commander of the Silata division was the Silata Aga. He was the official weapons master of the palace and a close personal aide of the Sultan, helping him to don his armor. He was also a liaison officer who supervised the communication between the Sultan and the Grand Vizier. The Sipahi division was the most prestigious of the 6 divisions. Traditionally, sons of Ottoman elites served in this unit. The Sipahis and Silatas were granted timur fiefs near Istanbul, alongside their salaries. Al-Lufasi means salaried ones, and the members of 2 Al-Lufasi divisions weren't granted timur fiefs. Garib means poor ones, and were paid salaries. The 6 divisions of Sipahis represented the Kapikulu cavalry in the same way that the Janissaries represented the Kapikulu infantry. Kapikulu means servant of the Porte. Servants of the Porte were legally servants of the Ottoman throne. They weren't literally slaves, though their legal status was different from other Ottoman people. The Sultan had the power to directly command execution of his servants without any court verdict. Theoretically, the Sultan didn't have this kind of power over other people, even simple peasants. If a freeman was promoted to one of Kapikulu Sipahi divisions, he considered automatically switched to KUL status. Equipment of Silata, Sipahi and Al-Lufasi divisions was plaited mail, chainmail, round shield, sword, composite bow, arrows, lance, bozdogan mason axe. Their equipment was similar to Rumeli provincial Timali Sipahis, though they wore brilliant fabrics, prominent hats and bore ornamented polearms. The 2 Garib divisions were more lightly equipped. In the classical period Ottoman battle formation, Kapikulu Sipahis were positioned back of the army as rear guards. They acted as reserve cavalry and bodyguards of Ottoman Sultan and Viziers. Their job included to join and reinforce Ottoman army's flanks, which otherwise consisted entirely provincial Timurid Sipahis. The Sipahis of the Porte were originally founded during the reign of Murad I, although the Sipahis of the Porte were originally recruited, like the Janissaries, using the Devzirma system, by the time of Sultan Mehmed II. Their ranks were only chosen from among the ethnic Turks who owned land within imperial borders. The Sipahi eventually became the largest of the 6 divisions of the Ottoman cavalry. The duties of the Sipahis included riding with the Sultan on parades and as a mounted bodyguard. Earlier times Silata division was accompanied Sultan on parades, though the Sipahi division took their place because sons of Ottoman aristocracy exclusively joined this regiment. Rivalry with the Janissary Corps. Since Kapikulu Sipahis were a cavalry regiment, it was well known within the Ottoman military circles that they considered themselves a superior stock of soldiers than Janissaries, who were sons of Christian peasants from the Balkans, and were basically slaves bounded by various laws of the Devzirma, whereas the Sipahis were almost exclusively chosen amongst ethnic Turkic landowners. They made great strides of efforts to gain respect within the Ottoman Empire, and the political reputation depended on the mistakes of the Janissary. That minor quarrels erupted between the 2 units is made evident with a Turkmen adage, still used today within Turkey, Atliya Baskaldiyamaz, which, referring to the unruly Janissaries, translates into, horsemen don't mutiny. Towards the middle of the 16th century, the Janissaries had started to gain more importance in the army, though the Sipahis remained an important factor in the empire's bureaucracy, economy and politics, and a crucial aspect of disciplined leadership within the army. As late as the 17th century, the Sipahis were, together with their rivals the Janissaries, the de facto rulers in the early years of Sultan Murad IV's reign. In 1826, after an evident Janissary revolt, the Sipahis played an important part in the disbandment of the Janissary Corps. The Sultan received critical assistance from the loyalist Sipahi cavalry in order to forcefully dismiss the infuriated Janissaries. 2 years later, however, they shared a similar fate when Sultan Mahmud II revoked their privileges and dismissed him in favor of a more modern military structure. Unlike the Janissaries before them, they retired honorably, peacefully, and without bloodshed into new Ottoman cavalry divisions who followed modern military tradition doctrines. Older Sipahis were allowed to retire and keep their Timur lands until they died, and younger Sipahis joined the Asakiri-Manchuri Muhammadiyya army as cavalry. Notable individuals: Ulabatli Hassan, T. Marriott. In popular culture, video games, Sipahis appear in the Creative Assembly's Empire Total War as a heavy cavalry unit employed by the Ottoman Empire and other Islamic factions. They also are employed by the Hindu Marathas. Also in Napoleon Total War, to the Ottomans as the second greatest lancer unit, second to another Ottoman unit, the Silahtar Guard. Sipahis appear in Ensemble Studios' Age of Empires 3 as a heavy cavalry unit unique to the Ottoman Empire. Sipahis are employed by the Turks in Medieval II Total War in 3 different forms: Sipahis, mounted archers, Sipahi lancers, heavy cavalry, and dismounted Sipahi lancers, heavy infantry. Sipahi is cavalry unit unique to Turkey and Cossacks. European Wars series computer games developed by GSC Game World. In the video game Assassin's Creed Revelations, the player can obtain a set of Sipahi riding armor for the protagonist. Other the spies are mentioned in the book The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas.